Deep in the silence of space, the ancient Zorn station hung like a sleeping giant. For 300 years, it had kept its secrets locked away. But today, something changed. A signal burst from the station, spreading across the galaxy like ripples in a pond. The station was finally calling for help. On board the station, the last remaining service robot rolled through empty corridors. Its joints creaked with age as it moved toward the central control room. Emergency lights flashed red, reflecting off the crystal walls. The robot's sensors detected another system failure, the 147th that day. At this rate, the station would not survive another 24 hours. Far away, in the bustling Galactic Council chamber, alien leaders received the station's cry for help. The tall, elegant Visari ambassador rose from her seat, her silver skin glowing under the chamber lights. Honorable council members, the Zorn station's distress signal cannot be ignored. That station holds the key to faster-than-light travel. Without it, half our worlds will lose contact with each other. Murmurs filled the chamber. Everyone knew about Zorn Station. For generations, the best engineers in the galaxy had tried to fix its failing systems. None had succeeded. The station's crystal technology was too complex, too different from anything they knew. Our best engineers failed. The squid-like Kraken representative waved his tentacles in frustration. Who could possibly help now? A young aide rushed into the chamber, waving a datapad. Council members, a ship is near the station. It's a human training vessel. The chamber went silent. Humans. The newcomers to the galaxy. The Deathworlders from Earth who had joined the galactic community just 5 years ago. Their ship carried 3 engineering students on a field trip to study alien technology. Students. The Visari ambassador laughed. What can students do that our experts couldn't? The Kraken representative moved closer to the data screen. Wait. These humans. They're from Earth, a high-gravity death world. Their minds work differently than ours. They solve problems in ways we never think of. On the screen, data scrolled showing the 3 students' records. Sam Chen, top of his class in mechanical engineering. Maya Patel, a genius with electrical systems. Jin Park, the best software engineer the Human Academy had seen in decades. As the council argued, the situation on Zorn Station grew worse. The service robot detected 3 more system failures. The station's crystal core pulsed with unstable energy. Ancient backup systems started to fail one by one. The Visari ambassador raised her hand for silence. We have no choice. These humans are the closest help we have. Send them the emergency signal. Aboard the human training ship Newton's Pride, alarms started beeping. Sam looked up from his textbook, his dark eyes widening at the emergency message. Maya, Jin, get in here. Maya rushed in, her long black hair floating in the low gravity. Jin followed, adjusting his glasses as he read the message. Their small ship's computer displayed the Zorn station's status. This is impossible, Maya whispered, looking at the station's schematics. The whole station runs on crystal technology. We've never seen anything like it. Jin pointed to the power readings. Look at these patterns. The whole station is dying. Life support, power, everything is failing. Sam grabbed his toolkit. They say the best engineers in the galaxy tried fixing it for 300 years. And they want us, 3 students, to try. We have to try, Maya said firmly. The message says millions of lives depend on that station's technology. As their ship approached Zorn Station, they got their first real look at it. The station was beautiful and terrifying. A massive structure of crystal and metal, glowing with internal lights. Emergency beacons flashed all along its surface. The ship's computer beeped again with an urgent update. Jin's face went pale as he read it. Bad news. Life support is failing faster than expected. We don't have a week, or even days. How long? Sam asked. 24 hours, Jin replied. After that, the station's core will collapse. And if it does, Maya finished his sentence. It'll take half the solar system with it. The three students looked at each other. They were humanity's best hope. Three young engineers against a problem that had stumped the galaxy's brightest minds for centuries. And now, they had just 24 hours to solve it. Sam took a deep breath and grabbed his helmet. Well, what are we waiting for? Let's go make history. The docking procedure at Zorn Station wasn't going well. As Newton's Pride approached the crystal docking bay, strange energy waves made the ship's systems go crazy. Warning lights flashed across the control panel. We're coming in too fast. Sam gripped the controls, his muscles straining against the sudden gravitational shifts. On Earth, he had trained in 4 times this gravity, but this was different. The station's crystal technology was creating gravity waves that bounced and twisted like nothing they'd ever seen. Maya quickly rewired their ship's landing systems. The crystal structures are alive, she said, her eyes wide with wonder. They're responding to our approach like a living thing. Jin's fingers flew across his keyboard. The station's AI is trying to talk to us, but not in any computer language I've ever seen. It's singing? The ship finally locked into place with a hard thud. As the 3 human cadets stepped out, they found themselves facing a delegation of alien engineers. The head engineer, a tall Vizari named Senior Expert 6, looked down at them with all 4 of her eyes. So, Zix's voice dripped with doubt. These are the Deathworlders who think they can fix our station in hours when we couldn't in generations. Before anyone could answer, the station shuddered. Crystal panels along the walls pulsed with sickly light. The ancient service robot that had greeted them suddenly sparked and collapsed. Sam immediately dropped to his knees beside the robot. Coming from Earth's heavy gravity, he moved with surprising speed and strength. The aliens gasped as he easily lifted the heavy machine. "Look at this," he said, pointing to the robot's joints. "The crystal power cells are cracked, but not from age. These stress patterns, they're from fighting against changing gravity." Maya was already scanning the walls with her modified Earth equipment. The whole station is filled with microgravity waves. They're bouncing off the crystal structures like sound waves in a concert hall. Jin finished her thought. He pulled out his tablet, showing a pattern analysis. That's why the AI is singing. It's not just a computer. It's conducting an orchestra of crystal resonance. The alien engineers stared at their simple Earth devices in confusion. "Those are primitive scanners," one of them scoffed. "Our quantum analyzers show nothing like what you describe." "Sometimes simple is better," Maya replied. She pulled a small rubber ball from her pocket, a child's toy from Earth. She bounced it against the floor. The crystal walls pulsed in response. "See, the station reacts to basic vibrations." Suddenly, the main lights flickered and died. Emergency crystals cast an eerie blue glow through the corridors. The station's eyes song turned into what could only be described as a scream. "Power's dropping faster than predicted," 6 announced. "We have less than 20 hours now." Jin had plugged his tablet directly into a crystal panel. The AI is terrified. It's been alone for so long, trying to hold the station together. But it doesn't understand why its own systems are fighting against it. Sam studied the station's structural diagrams. "Look at these maintenance tunnels. They're designed for species from low-gravity worlds, but with these shifting gravity waves. No one could reach the core systems," Maya realized. Except maybe some Deathworlders who are used to crushing gravity." Sam finished with a grin. The station shuddered again, harder this time. A crystal panel exploded nearby, sending shards flying. The aliens ducked, but Sam caught a large shard barehanded. Instead of cutting him, it hummed against his palm. "Impossible," Zix exclaimed. "Crystal shards are deadly to touch." Maya took the shard from Sam, her eyes lighting up with excitement. "Not to us. Our bodies are denser, our skin thicker from evolving on Earth. We can handle direct contact with the crystals." Jin's tablet suddenly lit up with new data. "The AI, It's changing its song. It's trying to match our biological rhythms. But before they could celebrate this discovery, red warning lights began flashing throughout the station. A deep, resonant tone shook the very walls. The AI's song turned desperate. The main crystal core, Zix's voice shook. It's becoming unstable. If it shatters. The human cadets shared a look. They had found a way to interact with the station that no one had discovered in centuries. But had they discovered it too late? Sam squared his shoulders. His earth-bred muscles tensed for action. Maya, get your electrical gear. Jin, keep talking to that AI. I'm going to check those maintenance tunnels. You'll be crushed by the gravity waves. An alien engineer warned. Sam smiled grimly. I grew up playing sports in 4 times Earth's gravity. I can handle it. Besides, he looked at the crystal shard still humming in Maya's hand. I think this station has been waiting for someone who can speak its language. Not with fancy quantum computers, but with blood and bone and basic physics. Maya finished. The station's song changed again, almost like a hopeful note. The human cadets had 20 hours to solve a mystery that had stumped the galaxy's finest minds for 3 centuries. And they were about to try something no one had ever dared. They were going to tackle it the human way. Straightforward, physical, and maybe just a little bit crazy. Maya stood in the crystal control room, holding her grandfather's old vacuum tube radio in one hand and a piece of humming station crystal in the other. The alien engineers watched in confusion as she connected wires between them. What are you doing with that ancient device? Six asked, all 4 eyes blinking in disbelief. Looking at the past to save the future, Maya replied with a grin. She pointed to the crystal's internal structure displayed on her tablet. See these patterns? They're exactly like old Earth vacuum tubes, just made of crystal instead of glass. Meanwhile, deep in the maintenance tunnels, Sam crawled through spaces that crushed most species. Sweat dripped up instead of down as gravity waves twisted around him. His muscles burned from fighting forces that changed direction every few seconds. Found something. He called through the comm. The crystal support beams aren't broken. They're just out of alignment. Like an old Earth grandfather clock with its pendulum stuck. In the main computer core, Jin sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by floating holographic symbols. The station's AI danced around him in patterns of light and sound. You've been alone for so long, Jin spoke softly to the AI. No wonder you're scared. But you don't have to do everything perfectly. Sometimes the best solutions aren't perfect at all. He pulled out an old game console from his pocket, a simple device that ran classic Earth video games. Look at this. Early human computers could only process simple commands, but they made amazing things happen. Maybe you're trying too hard to be perfect. The AI's song changed, becoming simpler, clearer. Suddenly, power surged through a section of the station that had been dead for centuries. 10% power restored, Zix announced in shock. How did primitive gaming technology help? Sometimes the best answers are the simple ones, Jin explained. The AI was trying to run trillion-point calculations when all it needed was basic yes/no logic. Like the first video games, just up, down, left, right. Maya's voice crackled over the comm. Jin's right. These crystals aren't supercomputers. They're vacuum tubes. They just need the right frequency to resonate. Like tuning an old radio. She turned the dial on her grandfather's radio. The crystals around her began to pulse in harmony with its simple electromagnetic waves. More systems flickered to life. 20% power. Zix couldn't believe her readings. But our quantum computers are too complex. Sam finished, crawling out of a maintenance tunnel. His uniform was soaked with sweat, but he was grinning. The station doesn't need quantum calculations. It needs a rhythm it can dance to. He took off his boots and pressed his bare feet against the crystal floor. Years of training in Earth's heavy gravity had made him incredibly sensitive to vibrations. Feel that? The gravity waves aren't random. They're like a heartbeat that's out of sync. Maya connected more crystals to her radio setup, Earth's old AM radio frequencies. They're almost exactly matching the crystal's natural resonance. We didn't need to force the crystals to change. We needed to remind them of their original rhythm. The AI song began to match the radio's frequency. More systems came online. 30% power, 40%. Then suddenly, warning lights flashed red. A new alarm screamed through the station. Radiation leak in the core chamber. Zix's voice shook with fear. The primary crystal matrix is cracking. The AI song turned to panic. Power levels started dropping again. Jin's game console sparked and died as energy waves pulsed out of control. The timing is off, Sam realized. We got the frequency right, but the power flow is too much, too fast. Like trying to start a flooded engine. Maya looked at her radio, then at the dying crystal systems. We need to redistribute the power load. Like an old-style electrical grid during a brownout. The maintenance tunnels, Sam said. They're not just passages. They're power conduits. If we could manually realign the crystals. The radiation levels in the core are lethal. Zix protested. No living being could survive more than a few minutes of exposure. The three human cadets looked at each other. On Earth, their ancestors had worked in deep mines, fought through nuclear disasters, and survived in the harshest conditions imaginable. Lethal to most species, Jin said quietly. But Earth creatures evolved with higher radiation tolerance. We can handle about 10 times what most species can. We have maybe 5 minutes in there before we hit dangerous levels. Maya calculated. Not long, but long enough. Sam finished. He was already heading back to the maintenance tunnel. Jin, keep the AI calm. Maya, get ready to balance the power flow. I'm going to realign those core crystals by hand. By hand? Zix was horrified. That's impossible. The gravity waves alone would crush you. Sam smiled grimly. Good thing I played rugby in 4 times Earth gravity then. As he disappeared into the tunnel, Maya turned back to her makeshift crystal radio setup. Jin resumed his simple binary communication with the AI. They had found the station's rhythm, understood its basic needs. Now they just had to keep it stable long enough for Sam to reach the core. But in the back of their minds, a worrying question lurked. What would happen when all that power finally started flowing properly? Had they actually solved the problem, or just uncovered something much bigger? The station's song shifted again, taking on a tone none of them had heard before. It sounded almost like anticipation. Inside the core chamber, radiation swirled like invisible fire. Sam moved through the shifting gravity fields, using his Earth-trained muscles to fight against forces that changed direction every few seconds. The crystal matrices towered around him, pulsing with unstable energy. How's it looking in there, Sam? Maya's voice crackled through his comm unit. Remember that old washing machine I fixed in engineering class? Sam grunted, pulling himself along a crystal beam. The one that was totally unbalanced. This is like that, but instead of clothes, it's trying to spin the fabric of space-time. The station's AI sang a warning tone. Jin's voice came urgent over the comm. We've got bigger problems. The AI just showed me something. There's a quantum cascade building up. Like a pile of dominoes about to fall. In the control room, Maya watched in horror as her grandfather's radio began to smoke. The crystal frequencies were becoming too intense. She grabbed her backup plan. An old acoustic guitar she'd brought for long space journeys. If electronics won't work, she muttered, maybe good old-fashioned sound waves will. She struck a chord. The crystals around her hummed in response. Zix and the other alien engineers stared in disbelief as Maya began to literally play music to the dying station. The resonance patterns are stabilizing. Zix exclaimed. But how? That's just stretched carbon fibers in wood. Sometimes the oldest solutions are the best ones. Maya replied, her fingers finding the frequencies that made the crystals glow brighter. Earth musicians have been feeling vibrations and adjusting frequencies for thousands of years. Meanwhile, Jin had made a breakthrough with the AI. He'd connected his broken game console to the crystal matrix in a way no one expected. He'd taken it apart and was using the simple copper wire inside as a physical link. The AI doesn't just sing, Jin realized, his eyes wide. It dances. The gravity waves aren't random. They're part of a complex ballad of energy. He began tapping a rhythm on his makeshift copper connection, matching the AI's patterns. It's not about controlling the waves. It's about moving with them. Back in the core, Sam had reached the main crystal matrix. His radiation detector was screaming warnings. He had less than 2 minutes before he'd hit dangerous exposure levels. The crystals here were massive, each one larger than a car. They're not just out of alignment, he reported. They're scared. The crystals are actually trembling. An idea struck him. A crazy, impossible, completely human idea. Sam took off his protective gloves. Direct contact with the crystals could burn alien skin, but human calluses, thickened by evolution on a heavy world, could handle brief touches. "What are you doing?" Zix demanded. Direct contact could shatter them. "Trust me," Sam said. He placed his bare hands on the crystal matrix. On Earth, we learned sometimes machines just need a gentle touch. The crystal hummed against his palms. Sam closed his eyes, feeling the vibrations like he used to feel engine problems in his father's old truck. There, a rhythm, a pulse, like a frightened heartbeat. He began to hum an old Earth lullaby his mother used to sing. The crystal's vibrations slowly matched his voice. In the control room, Maya heard Sam's humming through the comm. Without missing a beat, she shifted her guitar playing to match his song. The station's crystals pulsed in harmony. Jin's eyes lit up as the AI's patterns changed. It's joining in. The whole station is trying to sing with us. For a moment, everything seemed to be working. Then, with a sound like shattering glass, one of the main power conduits burst. Gravity waves went wild. Sam was thrown against a wall as forces stronger than Earth's gravity crushed him from multiple directions. "Sam!" Maya screamed, her guitar strings snapping from crystal resonance. "The quantum cascade is starting." Jin's hands flew over his copper wire setup. "We've got maybe 5 minutes before total system collapse." Sam was trapped, pinned by impossible gravity. The radiation warning in his suit was now flashing red. He couldn't move, couldn't reach the crystal matrix that needed realignment. But he could still hum. Even as the pressure threatened to crush him, Sam kept humming his mother's lullaby. Maya, understanding instantly, began singing through the comm, her voice replacing her broken guitar. Jin tapped the rhythm into his copper wires, and the AI's song joined in. The station shuddered. The gravity waves pulsed. The crystals glowed brighter and brighter. From his pinned position, Sam watched in amazement as the giant crystal matrix began to move on its own, turning slowly, aligning itself to the rhythm of their song. "It's not just responding to frequencies," he gasped through the pressure. "The whole station is one giant instrument, and it's been waiting for the right musicians." But even as the crystals aligned themselves, warnings blared through the station. The radiation levels were still rising. The quantum cascade was still building. And Sam was still trapped, his exposure time dangerously high. Maya's voice shook as she sang, knowing her friend was in deadly danger. Jin's fingers were bleeding from tapping rhythms on the copper wire. The AI's song took on a tone of desperation. They were so close to saving the station, but would it cost them one of their own? In the crushing gravity of the core chamber, Sam made a decision. If he was going to be trapped here, he was going to give his friends every bit of data he could. "Maya," he called through the comm, his voice strained. "Remember how we used to tune engines by ear? I'm going to describe exactly what I feel from these crystals. Jin, get ready to record. If I don't make it out, don't you dare finish that sentence." Maya's voice was fierce. "Keep humming. Keep that connection. We're going to find a way. Because that's what humans do. The station's song reached a crescendo. Something had to break. Either the quantum cascade would collapse the station, or they'd find a solution. And they had less than 3 minutes to decide which it would be. In the darkness of the core chamber, pinned by impossible forces, Sam kept humming his mother's lullaby to the crying crystals of an ancient alien station. Maya's fingers were bleeding from making strings out of her spacesuit's spare wire, trying to recreate her broken guitar. She couldn't stop singing the lullaby, knowing it was the only thing keeping Sam connected to them. Next to her, Zix was frantically checking radiation readings from the core. His exposure levels are critical, the alien engineer warned. No species can survive much more. But Maya had an idea forming. Growing up in Mumbai, she'd seen street performers who could shatter glass with their voices. Sound waves, resonance, vibration. It all connected. Jin, she called. Remember that physics problem about resonant frequencies, about how soldiers break step crossing bridges? Jin's eyes lit up. He turned to his copper wire setup, fingers still bleeding but moving with new purpose. If too many soldiers march in step, the bridge's resonance can tear it apart. Or, Maya said, her voice rising with excitement even as she kept singing, if we match the exact right frequency, we can cancel out the harmful vibrations. Jin finished. He turned to the AI's dancing patterns, like noise-canceling headphones, but with quantum energy. In the core chamber, Sam heard their conversation through his fading comm unit. The crushing gravity had cracked 3 of his ribs, but his Earth-evolved bones were holding. He managed a painful laugh. Only humans, he gasped, would think of using broken electronics and physics tricks, from ancient bridges to save a quantum space station. Then he noticed something strange. Where his body pressed against the crystal wall, the surface had started to change. His sweat, human sweat, full of salt and minerals from a high-gravity world, was creating tiny patterns in the crystal. Maya, he called, fighting through the pain. Remember your uncle's salt crystal garden? How the crystals grew in patterns. Maya's eyes widened. She scrambled for her spacesuit's water reservoir, splashing her own sweat-soaked hand against the crystal control panel. Tiny patterns formed, matching the resonance of her voice. The station's not just singing, she realized. It's trying to grow, like a coral reef. Jin's fingers stopped mid-tap. That's why the AI is so scared. It's not a computer at all. It's more like a gardener. The whole station is alive. The AI's song changed, becoming something like a cry of relief. Finally, after centuries, someone understood. But they weren't safe yet. The quantum cascade was still building. Sam was still trapped. And now the crystal walls were starting to grow and shift in unpredictable patterns. Maya made a desperate decision. She hit the release on her suit's environmental controls, letting her body temperature rise. More sweat beaded on her skin as she pressed both hands against the crystal panel. If the station wants to grow, she said through gritted teeth, let's give it a pattern to follow. She began singing a different song, not the lullaby, but an ancient Hindu chant her grandmother had taught her. The crystals under her hands grew in spiraling patterns, following her voice. Jin understood immediately. He ripped open his own suit's temperature controls, pressing his sweat-covered hands to his copper wire setup. His contribution was a Korean harvest song, learned from his grandfather. The AI's song wove between their voices, adding its own harmony. The station's crystals began growing in 3 distinct patterns, each following a different song, but all working together. In the core chamber, Sam felt the gravity waves changing. The crushing force was becoming something else, a rhythm, a pulse, like a heartbeat trying to match his own. It's not trying to crush me, he realized. It's trying to understand how I survive Earth's gravity. With tremendous effort, he pressed one shaking hand against the crystal wall. His mother's lullaby joined the chorus of human voices and alien crystalline songs. The patterns grew faster. Maya's Hindu chant became desperate as she watched Sam's radiation readings climb higher. Jin's harvest song took on a pleading tone. The AI's voice rose in crescendo. Suddenly, every crystal in the station lit up at once. A blinding flash filled every chamber. The quantum cascade peaked. And then something impossible happened. The new crystal growths, born from human sweat and shaped by human songs, began absorbing the cascade. Like living lightning rods, they drew in the deadly energy. The patterns, Jin shouted. They're fractal, like how lightning follows the path of least resistance. In the core chamber, Sam felt the crushing gravity finally release. He collapsed to the floor, coughing but alive. The crystals around him had formed a perfect geometric pattern, a mix of all three songs they'd been singing. Maya's voice was hoarse as she stared at her readings, power levels stabilizing at 60%, 70, 80. The AI song became something entirely new, a harmony of human music and crystal frequencies. The station wasn't just working again, it was evolving. But their victory celebration was cut short by a horrible cracking sound. The new crystal growths were spreading too fast, too chaotically. The station's structure groaned under the strain. "Oh no," Jin whispered, watching the AI's patterns become frantic. "We didn't just wake up the station. We gave it a growth spurt." Maya looked at her hands, still pressed against the now-growing crystal panel. And like any living thing growing too fast, "It's having growing pains," Sam finished weakly through the comm. They had saved the station from collapse. Sam was alive. But now they faced a new crisis. How do you control a living space station that's suddenly growing like a teenager hitting a growth spurt? The AI song took on a note of panic as crystal growths started spreading through every corridor. They had 15 minutes at most before the station's structure was compromised by its own evolution. Maya, Jin, and a battered but determined Sam had done the impossible once. Now they had to do it again, and fast. Crystal growths spread through the station like glittering vines, beautiful but deadly. Maya ran through the corridors, carrying something that made the alien engineers think she'd finally lost her mind. A jar of her grandmother's homemade yogurt. The probiotics, she shouted into her comm. Remember high school biology? How bacteria colonies know when to stop growing. In another section of the station, Jin was connecting his broken game console's circuit board to the crystal walls in a bizarre pattern. Chemical signaling. He called back, like how ants tell their colony to slow down expansion. Sam, still weak from radiation exposure but moving with determined earthborn strength, dragged himself through maintenance tunnels. His spacesuit was wrapped with copper wires salvaged from every piece of equipment they could spare. Like a computer's heat sink, he gasped. "We need to give the energy somewhere to go." The station's AI sang in distress as crystal formations burst through walls and floors. Zix and the other alien engineers had retreated to their ships, convinced the station was doomed. But the human cadets had other ideas. Maya reached the central crystal matrix, her hands shaking as she opened her yogurt jar. "Every living thing needs balance," she muttered. "Even crystal space stations." She smeared the yogurt across the growing crystal surface. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the crystals began changing color where the bacteria-rich yogurt touched them. "Jin," she shouted, "the bacteria are creating a chemical reaction. Like coral reefs interacting with ocean bacteria." Jin's voice crackled through the comm. "The AI showing me something amazing. The original builders, they must have used biological components too. That's why quantum computers couldn't interface properly. The station needs organic patterns." In the maintenance tunnels, Sam had reached a critical junction. Crystal growths had nearly sealed off the pathway, but he could see something through the translucent formations. Darker crystals, ancient ones, pulsing with a different rhythm. "These old crystals," he called out, pressing his copper-wrapped hand against them. "They're like tree rings. They show the station's original growth pattern." The station shuddered. Maya's yogurt bacteria were spreading through the crystal network, creating new chemical patterns. Jin's game console circuitry was transmitting simple binary rhythms that the ancient crystals recognized. Sam's copper wire network was channeling excess energy like a lightning rod system. But it wasn't enough. The new growths were still spreading too fast. Then Maya remembered something from her childhood. When my little brother was having a growth spurt, she said his bones hurt so much he couldn't sleep. Until she pressed her hands against the crystal and began to sing. Not the lullaby this time, but a bouncing, playful song her mother used to sing while cooking. The kitchen song. Jin asked, confused. Cooking. Maya's voice rose with excitement. Heat and cold. That's how you control crystal growth. Sam caught on immediately. The maintenance tunnels. They're not just power conduits, they're temperature regulators. Like a reptile basking in the sun, then cooling in shade. Jin turned to the AI's dancing patterns. Can you remember? He asked it. How your builders used to help you rest between growth cycles. The AI's song changed, becoming something like a memory. Ancient cooling systems, long dormant, began to hum. That's it, Maya shouted. She switched songs again, this time to an old work song used by Mumbai street vendors who sold ice during summer. The cooling systems pulsed in rhythm with her voice. Sam, still wrapped in copper wire, pressed himself against a junction of old and new crystals. His fever-hot skin from radiation exposure met the cool ancient crystal. Like tempering steel, he gasped. You heat it up, then cool it down to make it stronger. The station's chorus became a symphony of hot and cold, growth and rest. Maya's yogurt bacteria created patterns that spread through the crystal network, showing it how to grow in balance. Jin's simple binary rhythms taught it when to pause. Sam's copper network channeled excess energy into useful paths. But they were running out of time. The outer hull was starting to buckle under the crystal expansion. Warnings blared through every chamber. We need something else, Maya said, watching her yogurt supply run low. Something to tie it all together. Jin stared at his game console's simple circuitry. In programming, when code grows too complex, you need a master control. Sam finished. Like a conductor for an orchestra. They all turned to the AI's dancing patterns. Its song had become uncertain, caught between growth and stasis. It needs to learn how to conduct both patterns, Maya realized. Not just growth, not just rest, but the dance between them. Jin's fingers flew over his copper wire interface, like teaching a child to walk. First step, rest. Next step. Sam pressed his fever-hot hands against the cooling crystals. The rhythm of life itself. Heartbeat, breath, motion, rest. Maya started singing again, but this time, she wove all their songs together. The lullaby, the work songs, the healing chants, even the simple beeping of Jin's game console. A pattern of life and rest, growth and pause. The AI's song began to change. Learning this new rhythm, the crystal growth slowed, then stabilized. New formations began growing in perfect harmony with the old. But as the station finally found its balance, a new alarm blared. The quantum energy they'd redirected was building up in the copper wire network. Sam, still wrapped in copper, felt electricity crackling around him. Too much power, he shouted. We need somewhere for it to go. The station's song rose to a crescendo. They had stopped the deadly growth, but now they had mere minutes before all that excess energy exploded, with Sam at ground zero. Maya looked at her empty yogurt jar, then at the stable crystal patterns it had created. A crazy idea formed, their last, best hope. Jin, she called. Remember how crystals can store data? What if we? The AI song suddenly changed, as if it understood. The fate of the station now hung on one final desperate gambit.